Good morning, colleagues. Thank you for attending and a warm welcome back to our PURCO SA Ponder virtual presentation series. We will commence with a short presentation lasting about 30 minutes and a question and answer session of 10
Aya, we
minutes.
can't hear you.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Not on my end. I can't hear you.
And now, can you hear me? Someone in the comments is saying they can hear me. Sean, can you just confirm if you can hear me? Sean, can you please confirm if you can hear me? Okay, let me continue. Okay. We will commence with a short presentation lasting about 30 minutes, a question and answer session of 10 minutes, and conclude with a lucky prize draw for a take-a-lot voucher worth 1,000 Rand. You are welcome to field questions in the chat box during the presentation, which will be answered at the end. Colleagues, please note that the webinar is being recorded and will be up on our PURCO SA website for those who are unable to join us right now and those who wish to revisit the presentation after some insight. This morning, our guest speaker will enlighten us on a trending topic, well-being and engagement, the role of leaders. Exploring the vital role of leaders in fostering employee well-being and engagement in the workplace. This session will cover strategies that drive a healthier, more motivated workplace. Our guest speaker today, Sean Zimunya, is an international trainer, well-being practitioner, and organizational development strategist at Winterton Consulting. Sean is a passionate advocate for employee well-being, positive leadership, and organizational excellence. His extensive experience and commitment to fostering positive workplace environments makes him a sought-after speaker and consultant in the field. As a distinguished senior psychotherapist with over 14 years of experience in the field, his experience extends to being a strategist, international trainer and developer, organizational development practitioner, and leadership coach, where he excels in integrating holistic approaches to enhance workplace dynamics and leadership capabilities. His expertise lies in leading workshops, seminars, training sessions globally to advance professional skills and organizational effectiveness, implementing and managing comprehensive well-being programs that promote physical, emotional, and mental health in the workplace, integrating holistic well-being practices into corporate environments, fostering organizational growth, coaching executives and leaders to maximize their potential and navigate complex organizational challenges, driving change management, enhancing organizational performance, developing and executing strategic initiatives that align with organizational goals and foster long-term growth, and developing robust leadership capabilities. Sean has worked in both clinical and corporate spaces and is an academic at heart, with a keen interest in strategy, leadership, and wellness, as well as ensuring that each human being he meets lives up to the true potential and breaks down barriers. As an experienced therapist and employee wellness specialist, Sean has been invited on many platforms in both corporate spaces and on various mediums such as national radio stations as a subject matter expert on mental and social health. Sean utilizes an eclectic approach that borrows from social work, sociology, psychology, spiritual, and traditional approaches as he believes in holistic as a vehicle to achieve well-being. Over the years, Sean has demonstrated great ability in working with corporate companies, executives, individuals, couples, families, groups, and communities. He is highly adaptable and he believes in diversity and in the uniqueness of everyone. Thank you, Sean, and welcome.
Good morning. Thank you to everybody that has joined this wonderful meeting. And I want to thank you for the opportunity to be able to address you once again. I just need confirmation, just a thumbs up if you can hear me loudly and clearly, because I couldn't hear Aya speaking. So could I please just get a thumbs up? Okay, perfect. I'm glad that you can hear me loudly and clearly. So I has already done an introduction, I take it, and so I'm not going to go into detail with regards to who I am and what I do, because I think she's done that. And so I'm going to go right into it. The reason why this conversation is important, the role of leaders um, in making sure that we cultivate employee well-being and employee engagement centers on the fact that the average adult human being spends 90,000 hours of their life at work. 90,000 hours, which translates quite easily to around a third of an individual's life. So it's important that they be engagement. It's important that they be well-being, because at the end of the day, what we want is employees who are fully engaged, employees who feel listened to, who feel understood, and who feel that they get the opportunities that they need to be able to do what it is that they do. So it's important for us to understand that for any thriving workplace, employee well-being is at the center. And we all know that well-being now has become such a huge and massive topic that gets discussed every single day. But at the root of it for me is the human being. We need to center people in all of the work that we do, especially when we're speaking about well-being. And this is primarily because we know that, when people are well, they become a lot more productive, they are a lot more engaged. And the second they're a lot more engaged, then they're bound to be a lot more creative and a lot more committed to their organization. And I always say this to leaders as well. You need to be mindful of the fact that we have the introduction now into the workplace of a younger generation. I call them AMA 2000. So those born in the year 2000 coming north of 2024. And when you look at what it is that they look for in a workplace, it's no longer enough for you to offer specific benefits or for you to offer a specific salary. They also actually want to be engaged. They want to be listened to. They want to be understood. And so it's important that even as we lead multiple generations, let's be mindful of the fact that there are certain nuances and certain dynamics that we need to be mindful of. And if you look at it, many of us, people in my generation at least, we were raised at a time where you did what you were told. And so many of us do not ever question authority. Many of us are not very expressive, even in terms of how we feel about certain things that we go through, especially in the workplace, where many a times people put on a facade, people put on their best clothes, their best makeup, and they put on their best smiles, even when deep inside things are not going the way that they're supposed to go. And so the primary difference then between people in my generation and AMA 2000 is they're quite self-aware and they're quite expressive as well. And I've had a number of leaders actually call me and say, listen, I don't know how to handle this. I've just been told by people that report to me that I'm toxic and I don't even know what that word means. And when I tried to figure out what it means, I got told I am not self-aware. I got told I do not exhibit emotional intelligence. I got told I do not create a safe psychological space for them to actually be able to thrive and for them to actually be able to express themselves. So all of that then, goes back to my point. We need to be mindful of the multiple generations that we now lead. Now, let's look at defining well-being and engagement, because the academic in me always wants to start by defining things. When we speak of well-being, we're speaking about physical, mental, and emotional health of an employee, and we're speaking about an organization. Then, if it wants to foster well-being, it needs to then create a positive and a supportive work environment. That's the only way in which they can be physical as well as mental and emotional health. And so many of you might be asking, but what's a positive and supportive work environment? We know that many of us are busy. We're teetering towards the end of the year. Silly season is upon us, but also we've got deadlines after deadlines. The pressure is real. And that's where well-being becomes important. Sometimes well-being is as simple as checking in on people, having a Teams meeting that has nothing to do with work. We're just doing personal check-in. How are you doing? What sort of support can I render to you as somebody that reports to me? And what is it that needs to be improved within the team itself? Let's look at our workflow. Are there things that we can do probably then to make sure that you don't spend an inordinate amount of time trying to complete your tasks? How do I make you more efficient? Talks like that are of prime importance because what then that says to an employee is that, listen, you are understood, but over and above that, you're actually valued. And because you're valued, then your particular leader is trying to create a psychologically safe environment that would enable you to thrive. Over and above that, it then includes then things such as checking the environment itself. So let's look at ergonomics, for example, the furniture that people are using. Is it furniture that is actually good for their human structure, their body structures, the chairs that they're using? Do we need to improve the chair, the furniture itself? Do we need to include spaces for people to exercise, for example, even in the workplace, if the institution allows and if the building itself allows? Is the building itself designed in such a way and the office itself designed in such a way that it fosters physical well-being? Are we also being intentional about speaking to people about the need for them to exercise regularly? Bear in mind, this is the best investment that any organization can make. When you invest in people, when you invest in their well-being, ultimately your organization becomes well, productivity also just goes up. So over and above that, do we have wellness programs? And this is part of the work that we do at Winterton Consulting, helping organizations design wellness programs, whether it means helping you find a service provider, whether it means helping you design specific interventions that speak to wellness. It could be that you come and you say to us, listen, my particular organization, communication is not going the way it's supposed to. Or perhaps there's so much conflict and the teams are disjointed. There's so much drama that's happening. And then perhaps we need to do a conflict mediation. Perhaps we need to do some emotional intelligence training just to capacitate all of the individuals within the team to make sure that on a physical health level, on a mental health level, and even on an emotional health level, they are where they're supposed to be at. Engagement then is characterized by employees feeling connected, motivated, and feeling that they contribute meaningfully to their work. And part of what we can do to foster engagement is to always seek their buy-in, especially in terms of programs and even in terms of some of the decisions that we make within organizations. These are some of the very low hanging fruits, right, that we could reach out to as leaders just to make sure that we're fostering well-being and engagement. Understand this. The whole notion, that people must leave their problems at the door when they come to work, that's a fallacy. You're one individual. Sitting wherever you're sitting now, if your particular child is not doing well, for example, or your partner is not doing well, or they've just been diagnosed with a chronic illness, you may try and convince yourself of the fact that, listen, when I'm at work, I focus only on work. And then when I go home, then I can worry about the drama. But at the end of the day, you're one individual. And so it's important that even in our workspaces, we create that space where we can cultivate empathy, where we can cultivate compassion itself in terms of some of the personal challenges that people go through. So what are some of the key metrics that we can use to measure well-being and engagement? The easiest would be employee satisfaction surveys. We can also use performance reviews. We can look at absenteeism rates and indeed burnout indicators, which are all very valuable measures that we can use to actually check what's happening within the organization. But I think that focus group discussions are also another great way of keeping your finger on the pulse and trying to actually understand what it is that your specific employees might be going through and what sort of help you need to offer to them. But for me, what is of prime importance is the fact that everything begins and ends with leadership. And so, what that means to me is if you as a leader are not well, if you as a leader are not investing in your own wellness, chances are that the entirety of your team follows suit because we all know, well, maybe some do not know, when you become a leader, all eyes are on you. That's the truth of the matter. And so you become an influencer of sorts and you become an ambassador of well-being itself if you're doing it correctly. We all know that when a leader sneezes, the entire organization or the entire team catches a cold. So for me, what it means then is that we actually have to start with ourselves, focus on ourselves. How well are we doing in terms of our physical well-being? Are we actively engaged in making sure that all our employees, starting with us, get the physical health checkups that they need? Are we actively involved in organizing wellness days where they can have opportunities to have a number of tests done? Are we actively involved in making sure that the climate we're creating as leaders is such that it fosters well-being and indeed engagement? So, what is exactly is the role of leaders then? Firstly, you need to lead by example. And for me, the true test of leadership is that you cannot expect of people what you yourself cannot give. You cannot expect of people, the teams that you lead, people that report to you, what you yourself as a leader cannot actually give. So if we're saying that we want to foster well-being and engagement, then it needs to start with us as leaders. Because leaders at the end of the day set the tone for the workplace. And so that means you have to demonstrate healthy behaviors yourself. And you need to be mindful of the fact that whether you agree with this or not, as a leader, you become the ambassador of all the interventions within the organization. And my hope would be that you take up the mantle, even when it comes to wellness and well being, and you run with it and make sure that you exhibit healthy behaviors and then make it easy for everybody else to follow suit. It's also important for leaders to also just create an opportunity for open and transparent communication and an environment where employees feel comfortable to share their concerns and their ideas. And that speaks a little bit to what we call psychological safety. Have we created a climate in the organizations that we lead where employees know for a fact that they can speak their mind, they can disagree, they can agree to disagree without fearing any repercussions, without there being any threats to their person or to their careers themselves, without there being this climate of fear. Because once there's a climate of fear, psychological safety jumps out of the window. And once psychological safety jumps out of the window, then automatically what it means is there is no proper engagement. And so that's where we find concepts such as quiet disengagement, where people come to work for the sake of coming to work, where people do the bare minimum because they feel their contributions are not necessarily valued. They feel there's no space for them to voice their concerns, whatever those concerns may be. So we need to be clear about and intentional about creating environments where open and transparent communication takes place. But it's also about empowerment and trust. Leaders really should empower employees by giving them autonomy and responsibility. And this ultimately actually leads to well-being itself. You know, the statement, nothing for us without us, sounds quite simplistic, but when you look at it, it speaks to ownership. And in my experience, whenever I give the team an opportunity to co-own or to lead, co-lead on particular programs or on particular interventions, then they actually become a lot more engaged. But over and above that, they become a lot more passionate about that particular project in and of itself. And ultimately, when human beings feel that they are needed, they are valued, they are understood, they can contribute, that then leads to fulfillment. And when there's that fulfillment, then we have the release of the feel good hormones. So even on an emotional and psychological level, we feel that, you know, we are where we're supposed to be. We feel that we are contributing as much as we are supposed to contribute. And we're not just doing the job for the sake of doing the job. So that's quite important. Over and above that, there needs to be some recognition and appreciation as well. We should do our best to acknowledge and appreciate employee contributions, both big and small. And you know, when we speak about recognition and appreciation, it's not about the big things. It's yes, surely we can pay the 13th check, and all of that is feasible and possible. But it's small things like just saying thank you. Somebody does well on a project. Do you take the time to write an entire email or perhaps on a Monday morning staff meeting, just acknowledge them in front of everybody else. You've done great work. You have been dedicated. The project has gone the way that it was supposed to, and we've actually attained all of the objectives and all of the imperatives that we set out to attain. Appreciation and recognition go a very long way in ensuring and enhancing well-being itself, but also even engagement. Now, I was actually doing a little bit of research, and I was speaking to a colleague, and I was saying, at the end of the day, many of us remain deep inside of ourselves, those small children that still seek validation, those small children that still seek recognition and appreciation from whomever we deem to be an authority figure. Remember, it starts in childhood, where your relationship with your parents is centered around you seeking to some degree some form of validation and some form of recognition and appreciation. And it actually continues even into adulthood, right? Where we want to be acknowledged and we want to be recognized for whatever it is that we would have done or the work that we would have done. And so it's important that as leaders, we keep that in the back of our minds, that it's actually such an easy way of fostering well-being and engagement. Just to appreciate people for the work that they would have done that is awesome and that deserves to be recognized. So we need to also then understand the impact of leadership on employee well-being. What is that impact? Leaders who show empathy and support create a very positive work environment that ultimately boosts employee motivation and performance. And I know that many of us worry about performance. Are people performing? Are people motivated? Are people doing what they're supposed to do? And when it comes to motivation, we need to understand that it's at two levels. We have intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation, right? And so it's important that in as much as we can focus on giving them the bonuses, focus on creating great work environments, but we also have to help them to develop that intrinsic individual motivation by way of appreciating them as much as we can, by way of showing empathy as much as we can, and being as supportive as much as we can. And I know you are not a psychologist, you're not a therapist, and so it may actually be out of your purview, but the second you start leading people, remember that your first task as a leader is to eliminate any blockages that may be standing in the way of your team members becoming the best possible version of themselves. So what that means also is that you're actually leading individuals on a journey of self-discovery as well, in as much as you're leading them on the work front. So bear that in mind. Ultimately, then, we also know that effective leadership fosters a culture of open communication, which then fosters mental well-being and reduces stress and burnout. Mental health is a major, major, major key thing that we need to focus on, especially because it's grossly misunderstood in South Africa. Over and above being grossly misunderstood, it's also just grossly underfunded. Research actually shows us that only 27% of employees or individuals in this particular country that will ever present with a mental health issue will ever get any sort of help. And so what that then means is that you are probably working with individuals in your teams that may very well be undiagnosed, and they may have one mental health issue or the other. And so this is why compassion is important. This is why empathy is important. This is why kindness is important. This is why well-being initiatives are important, because we need to foster mental well-being. And we need to also understand, at the end of the day, there's an inextricable link between mental well-being and physical well-being. If one is not well on a mental health level, ultimately they are likely to fall ill, even on a biophysical or physiological level. And the inverse also applies. If one is not well physically, they may very well end up not being well on a mental health level. And so we need to be mindful of that. And we all need to do our part play our part when it comes to mental health. And I would actually want to issue a clarion call right now to all the leaders in the session. Can we actually become mental health champions ourselves? Let's sponsor well-being initiatives in our organizations. Let's make sure when there are webinars, we attend those webinars. When there are wellness days, we attend those particular wellness days. And let's make sure that we're using, if we have, an employee assistance program, let's make sure that we're championing that and popularizing its usage as well. Because what I find is that most people, most of our clients, you get maybe middle management, being parts of playing a part in terms of mental health. And then you don't find senior leaders a lot of the times joining in many of these initiatives. And so the unspoken message to all the other employees then is, well, wellness is just, it's whatever, man. It's not really important. And yet it's actually at the center, of well-being itself. And so we need to make sure that we're fostering that. We know for a fact, from statistics from the South African Depression and Anxiety Group, that 1 in 6 employees will at one point or the other present with anxiety or stress or depression. The numbers might actually even have gone higher, post-COVID. The numbers might also have gone higher, because of the economic crunch that we're currently faced with. So wellness, 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 that needs to be at the center. Over and above that, we also need to look at how employee retention actually happens. When we foster well-being and engagement, ultimately, employees that feel engaged and supported are less likely to leave their jobs. And that ultimately contributes to, long-term organizational success. And overall well-being itself, when we prioritize our employees' well-being, we create a positive and sustainable work environment for each and every individual within the organization. And so remember, it's not just about how much you're paying people, it's also about the culture itself that you are fomenting within the organization, that you're cultivating within the organization. So what are some of the strategies that we can employ? Low-hanging fruits could be ergonomic workspaces that I alluded to earlier on. If we provide comfortable and adjustable furniture, to promote good posture and to minimize physical discomfort, that's a great idea that we can actually implement. I know that we're so worried about budgets and, making sure that the company is always in the black, we're never in the red, etc. But some things are really, ladies and gentlemen, low-hanging fruits. You walk into some offices sometimes, and people don't seem to understand that even the office furniture is an extension of your brand as an organization. So if I walk into your organization and all of a sudden it looks like it's furniture from some archaic organization, there is no proper order, there's no proper arrangement. The quality even of the furniture is such that it's a little bit worrisome. Then you wonder why people are not as creative sometimes as they ought to be, or why people are not as motivated to be in the workspaces as they often have to be in. So we need to be mindful of the ergonomic workspaces, be intentional about creating those. Get rid of the clutter, ladies and gentlemen. We know that on a psychological level, that actually just blocks people's creativity. It makes the energy in the room heavy. So get rid of the clutter, clean up the spaces as well. Just be proud of the workspace that you're working in and make sure that it's as comfortable and it's as accommodative of everyone that works in that organization. Over and above that, low-hanging fruits such as flexible work arrangements where possible. You can offer flexible schedules and remote work options, to try and accommodate individual needs and preferences. And I think COVID taught us a huge lesson, that uh, seeing people sitting on desks does not mean they're working, right? People are still able to be productive. I mean, if the institutional rules apply or accommodate that, they're still able to be as innovative and as creative, even in their individual spaces. In fact, what we're seeing is that people are actually working more when they work from home because and I'm not saying it's the right thing, but what we're saying is people end up not taking the breaks that they would take in the office. They're not taking that, whether it's a tea break or even a lunch break. People are, and it's not the right thing, by the way, I need to emphasize that. So people are actually putting in a lot more work when they work from home. So that notion that no, when people work from home, they laze around, etc. No, we need to be adaptable as leaders. And then wellness programs as well. Try and implement programs that focus on physical, mental, and emotional well-being, such as fitness challenges, mindfulness sessions, and even stress management workshops. These are such low-hanging fruits, and it forms part of the bouquet and the coterie of services that we provide at Winterton Consulting. Social events as well. And I noticed with many, many clients, ever since COVID, they just didn't go back to doing that. People used to have like Braai Friday once every month, probably at the end of the month. People used to have these small little initiatives where they would gather around, share some food, share cake, and just make the environment a lot more enjoyable. But ever since COVID, we've all just gone back to business, focusing on doing what we need to do. And we've forgotten the people element. We've forgotten how it's important to build a rapport, how it's important to build sustainable relationships with the teams and make sure that to the furthest extent possible, we actually spend time together because that fosters, without even me explaining it, it fosters team cohesion, actually makes us understand each other a lot better when we spend some quality time together as employees. So team building activities, people are not doing that anymore. And even social events to foster this sense of camaraderie and a sense of community and to foster esprit de corps. People are not doing that unity of purpose. So it's lacking now because we've gone back to being individualistic again. We've gone back to just focusing on what needs to be done today, and we're forgetting the people element again. So part of what we can also do, we need to foster then effective communication and feedback. How do we do that? Active listening. I know we're busy. I know we are busy, but as leaders, we should actively listen to employee concerns and feedback and try and ensure that they feel heard and understood. Something as simple as somebody walks into your office, right? And I know we all think we're great at multitasking. Actually, we're not, because research actually shows us that it's only 2.5% of people in the world who are good at multitasking. The majority of us think we're multitasking, but we're not. We're actually just either not paying full attention to the individual we're speaking to, or we're not fully engaged with what they're saying. So we need to be intentional about practicing active listening itself. So stop typing, look up, engage with that person, eye contact, right? If at that time you're so busy that you're unable to entertain them, then indicate, listen, are you able to come back at this particular time so that I can actually give you my full attention? That's okay. But don't pretend to be listening. And how you tell somebody's pretending to listen, head down, they're typing away. Before you even finish whatever it is you're trying to say, they've already given you a solution, or they're trying to point you in a certain direction. And I know that sometimes it comes with second nature as leaders. We are a lot of the time solution focused. But I want us to be mindful of the fact that sometimes people just want to be listened to. People just want to be understood. Okay. So we can also then have regular checkups, whether it's one-on-one meetings with employees to discuss progress, to discuss their challenges, to discuss areas of improvement. But I also want us to make it a point to have one-on-one check-ins that have nothing to do with work, where we're just focusing on them as people. How are you doing? How are things at home? Can we be of assistance in any way? Right? But also let's provide constructive feedback that is specific, that is actionable, and that is focused on improvement. So even when, as a leader, this is important, even when you are unimpressed by what somebody has done, be mindful of the language that you use, because words can build and the same way that words can destroy. We need to be mindful of that. If this is somebody that you actually see is talented and you value them, then surely the words that you use are going to be calculated and they're going to be designed to give constructive feedback, as opposed to making somebody feel small, as opposed to humiliating someone, as opposed to making someone feel as though they're the worst possible individual alive in the world. Let's be mindful of that. It's also important to foster, open dialogue. Let's have conversations, right? You actually learn a lot more when you listen to other people speaking. And I always say to leaders, bear in mind, whomever you deem the creator to be, you were designed with two ears and one mouth for a reason. You're supposed to listen twice as much as you speak. But I think that over time, many of us fall in love with our voices, right? So we want to have an opinion on everything. We want our voices to be heard. And sometimes, really, all we need to do is to sit back and actually listen and give other people the platform so that they express themselves, because in that way we're actually able to learn as much as we can. And it's important that as leaders, as Brenner Brown would say, we need to always have the ability to learn, unlearn, and relearn as much as is possible. Okay. Let's also then offer professional development of opportunities, because that fosters well-being and it fosters engagement as well. Because when you invest in employee development, that then results in individual growth, which ultimately results in organizational success, right? So whether it's training programs or it's mentorship programs or it's tuition reimbursement, if the budget allows, let's do that. Let's offer that, because all of this actually helps all of our employees to feel that they are valued, their career advancement is valued, we are centering them, we have their best interests at heart, and we're interested in their development. And so we are providing intentionally so professional development opportunities for them to climb the ladder as much as is possible. I think many of us know how mentorship is important and how you probably would have gone further than you've gone now if you had a mentor earlier on in your career. So can we be, and this is something I always want to share, can we be the leaders that we needed when we were junior employees? Can we be those leaders? Can we be intentional about becoming such leaders? The leaders that we all wanted, the leaders that we all valued, the leaders that we all sought when we were junior employees, leaders who are caring, who are compassionate, who are kind, who, of course, yes, put in place boundaries and point us in the right direction, but also ultimately inspire us and motivate us. Can we be those particular leaders? It's also important for us to try and strike a work-life balance and have some flexibility. It's not always possible for us to attain work-life balance, but we need to try and balance it as much as is possible. And we need to make sure that employees, can manage their work as well as their personal responsibility without having to sacrifice their health or their happiness. Why? Because that's an unsustainable way of doing things. If all you're doing is forcing people to sacrifice their health and their happiness, you can only get so much out of them. At some point, they will crash and burn. At some point, the burnout levels in your organization are going to be astronomically high, and you're going to start having costs now in care, in terms of healthcare, in terms of absenteeism. And so, to avoid all of that, let's try and have flexible work schedules. Let's try and have remote work options where possible, paid time off, and even parental leave, right? And I always cringe when I hear leaders saying, I haven't taken leave in 5 years. Like, sir, ma'am, you are a walking heart attack. And let's be mindful of the fact that in as much as work is important, at the end of the day, I can assure you now, your children and your partner, none of your children, if you were to put them in the room, are going to say, yeah, I want my parent to be the most hardworking employee in whatever organization they work. All they're looking for is a parent that's fully present, that's emotionally available, that's supportive of their initiatives and everything they try and do. The same applies to your partner. When they chose to be with you, whether through a marriage or through a long-term committed relationship, they were not looking for the best employee of the month or the best employee of the year. They were just looking for a partner who is able to listen, who is able to understand, who is able to be fully present with them. So we need to be able to strike that balance. And I think it would be a travesty of justice if you are to excel so much in corporate and in the work world, but then have nobody to share it with because you've lost the people that you love, because you have not just been present on an emotional level, on a psychological level, and indeed even on a physical level. Bear in mind what matters the most is the relationships that we have with the people that we love. And ultimately, that then actually helps us to make a positive contribution even in the workplace. Okay. We've spoken about recognition and rewards. That's another powerful tool of boosting morale and engagement, because it shows employees that their contributions are valued and they are appreciated. So things such as awards and recognition, right? And it doesn't have to cost much. You literally could run a employee of the week, for example, and then we shine the spotlight on this particular employee because they've attained such and such progress, or they finished this project in record time. We appreciate their effort, or they've actually helped out, other teams that may have been struggling. Small little things like that. Performance bonuses, certificates and letters of commendation or letters of appreciation or other formal acknowledgements. These are all, in my opinion, low-hanging fruits that we can use as leaders to actually cultivate, well-being and engagement. Public acknowledgement as well, right? So acknowledging employee achievements in company meetings, in newsletters, or even on social media, because all of us, at the end of the day, we want that recognition, we want that validation. We spoke earlier on about mental health and stress management, and this is actually the most, for me, the most essential aspect of employee well-being. So part of what we can then do is obviously then have employee assistance programs where we offer confidential counseling and support services for employees that are facing personal or work-related challenges. We can have mental health awareness trainings. We can have flexible work arrangements, stress management workshops, and if you are in an organization that may not be doing this quite well and maybe you need guidance, then you feel free to actually reach out to us so that we're able to provide some guidance and provide tailor-made solutions for your specific organization. We also need to cultivate trust and transparency, right? Because these two are essential ingredients in building a very strong and cohesive work environment, right? So employees need to feel confident that their leaders are honest, but that they're also open about the organization's direction and the organization's decisions, right? And this is where it gets tricky because most leaders are so used to just making pronouncements. And this is why, if you'll allow me to join it to our everyday lives and our families, sometimes this is why there are difficult relationships between parents and children, especially the generation I spoke of earlier on. I'm at 2000, right? As parents, sometimes we're so used to being dictatorial, do this. And then when we get a child that's inquisitive, that actually wants to ask, okay, explain to me what the rationale is. Why do I need to do this? Then we feel offended. You're being disrespectful. You're questioning my authority. But that's not what it is. How about you just engage with them to say, listen, the rationale that went into making this particular decision is A, B, C, D. My take is if you're a leader, a sound leader at least, you should be able to explain your decisions, unless if your decisions are not well thought out. If they're well thought out, if they're logical, then surely there shouldn't be an issue with you having to explain why you've made a particular decision. And by explaining, that's not you giving away your power. What you're actually getting is the buy-in of the teams that you lead. When they understand what your thinking is and why you're directing them in a particular manner and why you're pushing them in a particular direction. Okay, so open communication, but also two-way feedback, right? So encourage open dialogue and feedback, both from leaders to employees and employees to leaders. It's important. And let's also then have a shared vision. Leaders should obviously be able to clearly communicate what the organization's vision, what the goals are, and they need to ensure that employees understand their role in achieving those particular goals. What is the impact of engaged employees? Increased productivity, um, where employees feel a lot more motivated and focused, and that then results in higher levels of productivity and efficacy as well as efficiency itself. Improved innovation, right? Because employees will feel valued and supported when you provide them with the leeway to actually own their decision-making processes and to actually own the projects themselves. They become a lot more creative and a lot more innovative. And ultimately, that results in enhanced customer service because once an employee is engaged, they're more likely to try and provide excellent service. When they feel they co-own the business, they co-own the project, they co-own the product, they make it theirs. And so it becomes their personal mission to make sure that they offer the best possible service that they can. There's also reduced turnover because once employees feel engaged and valued and appreciated, they're obviously less likely to leave the organization, which results in lower turnover rates as well as reduced recruitment costs. So notions such as, yeah, there are high levels of unemployment in the country, we can always get someone else. Yeah, that thinking is fundamentally flawed because there are obviously going to be recruitment costs. You're also losing institutional memory. Over and above that, you're going to have to train whoever you're getting in who's new. In as much as they may come with a wealth of experience, the fact of the matter is their experience does not apply to your organization or may not always apply to your organization because the dynamics may be different, the culture may be different, the ways of working may be different. So let's be mindful of that. Over and above that, let's look at a quick case study of Microsoft itself. So what Microsoft did is during the COVID-19 pandemic, it prioritized employee mental health. Their CEO at the time, Satya Nadella, actively promoted the importance of empathy and mental well-being during company-wide meetings. And in his communication with employees, he encouraged managers to check in on their teams quite regularly, not just about work, but also about how they were feeling mentally and emotionally. They also then took quite a proactive approach to employee well-being by offering mental health days, by offering access to online therapy and mental health apps such as Headspace. And the impact was, they fostered trust and openness within the organization because many of their employees felt supported and appreciated, and that ultimately resulted in high levels of engagement, despite the challenges of remote work. We all know how difficult remote work was, and how it still is, because many of us are still working remotely as well. But that extra support that Microsoft went out of their way to provided a psychological buffer, for employees to feel safe, for them to feel understood, and for them to feel listened to as well. Unilever did more or less the same thing. They promoted holistic well-being. They recognized that employee well-being extends beyond physical health to include emotional, mental, and financial health. So they then developed a global well-being framework based on four pillars, physical, mental, emotional, and purpose. That's what they focused on. And Alan Jupe, their CEO at the time, played an active role in promoting this framework, and he regularly communicated with employees about the importance of balancing work with self-care and purpose. And they also encourage leaders at all levels, like all the leadership rungs, to adopt a holistic approach to supporting their teams, offering resources such as access to mental health support, fitness classes, and financial planning tools. And the impact was, this initiative resulted in a more engaged workforce, with employees reporting higher satisfaction levels and stronger alignment with the company's purpose. And so the focus on well-being ultimately helped them to reduce stress, to improve their overall morale, and it led to greater productivity. So in closing, I do want us to actually embrace well-being as a strategic priority, right? Because when we invest in well-being, it pays off in the long run. And so it's important that we prioritize well-being. It's important that as leaders, we create a thriving workplace that attracts, retains, and motivates top talent. And the easiest ways of doing that: take a leading role in fostering well-being and engagement. But remember what I say. Ultimately, the fact of the matter is everything starts with you as a leader. And so make sure that you're championing well-being, make sure that you're championing engagement. I think I want to end here, and I want to open it up to the floor for comments, for contributions, and for any questions that might be there.
Thank you so much, Sean, for a very engaging and engaging session. Are you able to hear me? Because I'm going to field questions from the chat box for you.
Still can't hear you, Aya.
You can't hear, I think it
But
could
it's
be your,
okay. I'm glad that the presentation actually took place. So maybe then, if there are any questions, any comments, any contributions from the floor, please unmute and engage with me, or alternatively put up your question in the chat so that I can actually address it.
okay, Sean, can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
let me try. Okay, so clearly I can't hear Aya, but I'm going to try and address some of the questions that are in the in the chat. What are some of the most overlooked aspects of employee wellness that organizations often miss, and how can HR leaders bring these into focus? So I was having a discussion with a colleague in the industry who actually works in HR, and they were saying it's things as simple as when there is a death in one of the team members within the organization, in their families, are we giving the support that is necessary? When there is a birth in the same way, are we giving support? Because at the end of the day, you want to be able to support people holistically, right? So it cannot be just programs that are aimed at the organization as a whole that do not address individual aspects, such as what stage of life is this particular person in? And how can the organization actually support that particular individual if they've just become a new dad, for example? Do we have a program? And I know that if you have a very good wellness service provider, they actually do have talks, trainings, even on parenting, for example, trainings on financial planning, even trainings on people that want to get married. These are small little things that may seem like they are small to many, many people in HR, to many, many people in leadership, but they have such a huge impact on the individual within the organization. So it's important that we foster that. And then the next question is, what role does emotional intelligence play in managing employee wellness, and how can HR develop this skill across leadership? So there are actually quite a lot of emotional intelligence training courses that are there. We actually run one as well that we offer to leaders, where we come in. Firstly, we ascertain where they are in terms of their emotional intelligence, and then we take them through a 12-week course that's designed specifically to foster emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence is essentially at the key of managing employee wellness, because even research shows us, when a leader, when we look at joining corporate, for example, what we look at initially when you're in the lower ranks or in the junior positions, we look at IQ, what qualifications do you have, what experience do you have, etc. But as people climb the corporate ladder, as they become executives, C-suite executives, etc., the focus then changes, and we start looking at EQ, which is your emotional intelligence. That's what research shows us. So emotional intelligence is of prime importance, and as HR, people in HR need to make sure that they're centering emotional intelligence. If you want ideas with regards to how to do that, then reach out to us and we'll be able to support you in that regard. And then there was another question: for employees who struggle to find work-life balance, what strategies or resources can organizations provide to help them without encroaching on their personal time? We have to look at what is the issue. Is this person overwhelmed because of work pressures, or are they overwhelmed because of home pressures? If it's work pressures, then we can look at our workflow, we can look at reassigning tasks, we can look at giving them additional support and all of that. If it's on a personal level, then maybe it might be that they need some level of life coaching or individual on the home front. Let's design interventions that can empower this individual to make the most of the opportunities that they get on the work front, but also be able to deal with whatever is happening on the home front. Uh, 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 in actual fact, for me, it's when you look at the most important ingredients, it's people, it's the product, it's the place, and then for me, you add a W, which is wellness. So wellness should be at the center, and so we need to be mindful. It needs to be in included or inculcated in the day-to-day running of the organization. So when we speak programs, we're not speaking about, oh, let's have Wellness Day, yay, happy, let's have Women's Day, yay, let's celebrate. Those are important initiatives, but wellness actually should be at the center of each and every single thing that is happening in the organization on a day-to-day basis. Every single engagement that is happening should be wellness centered. Whether we're doing a disciplinary thing, whether they're supposed to with the organization, we need to center wellness. So it can't be an afterthought, it can't be a nice to have, it needs to be at the center, because ultimately, when we speak wellness, we're speaking people as well. And you know that people are the most important ingredient when it comes to organizations, when it comes to making sure that the organization actually gets to meet some of the operational objectives and imperatives that it has. Okay. How do you get buy-in from the team to engage with this type of sessions? My team seems to not be interested. So what you might want to do is to focus on how did you design those initiatives, right? Did you actually go and conduct a needs analysis and get their buy-in to say, okay, guys, so when we speak wellness, for example, what sort of sessions or engagements would you want, right? But also, what I find sometimes is that over and above not being people-centered when we design the initiatives, sometimes the environment just doesn't allow. We've got all of these work pressures. Our managers are not even supportive of wellness itself. They don't understand why I have to take an hour away from work to attend a session, and then you expect us to attend the session. No, we won't. We will focus on the deliverables, because next thing we get pressurized, we get told you're wasting time attending stupid initiatives when you're not doing your work, etc., etc. So what I would actually suggest is that you start with the leadership itself. If they buy into it, if they support wellness and they center wellness, then it makes it easy for all of the employees then to actually join the initiative. But also it's important to hear from the people themselves. What sort of initiatives are they looking for, right? That then makes you design interventions that speaks to what their specific needs are. I'll give an example. You can come and do an intervention that's focused on finances. And maybe we're all doing well financially, but relationship wise, we're all suffering. So your initiative that's addressing finances is not speaking to our needs. So we're definitely not going to attend. So think of that. And then the other question was, is there a direct link between organizational culture and leadership style to the employees' well-being? Certainly. I can tell you this without a shadow of doubt. Culture will eat strategy for breakfast any day. It will eat well-being for breakfast any day. Because remember, culture is essentially what you do on a day-to-day basis. So if what you do on a day-to-day basis does not foster wellness, you can have the best employee well-being initiatives. They're not going to work, because the day-to-day running of the organization, the day-to-day occurrences within the organization are such that they do not foster wellness or well-being. So the culture is actually the most central ingredient as well when we're designing these well-being initiatives. Let's be mindful of creating a culture that perpetuates and that foments well-being itself. I hope that I have answered. Otherwise, you're welcome to reach out to me at
Just
Sean
scroll
at
down.
woodconsulting.co.za. Okay, are there other questions? Okay, I'm trying to find them. Okay, on my end, I think I've answered all. Okay, there's one that's saying, I think workplace bullying, especially by leaders, is also a very crucial aspect to be addressed. True, very true, because leaders are supposed to be aware of their own behavior. And this is true. This is why part of the work that we do includes, like I said earlier on, emotional intelligence for leaders. Why? Because hurt people hurt other people. People who are not self-aware, a lot of the times end up bleeding on people that didn't cut them. And it's horrendous when such a person is actually a leader, because then they damage people, then they make the work environment toxic, they make it difficult for people to thrive. So that's a very important contribution. We need to start with ourselves. That's why I said your first responsibility as a leader is to lead yourself. Your first responsibility, second responsibility as a leader is to then make sure that you eliminate any blockages that may be standing in the way of your employees becoming the best possible versions of themselves that they should be. Okay. So Aya, on my end, I think I've answered everything and I've put my again, from what I'm saying, I've answered. And if there are any questions that anyone else has, I've also actually put out my email address in the chat box. I'm putting a second one that you can reach out to me at, so that we can actually then make sure that we address any of the concerns that you have, or help you with whatever it is that your specific organization might actually need. But thank you so much for your time, and thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, colleagues. Thank you, Sean, for a very engaging session. Colleagues, if you have any questions, I will take all the questions that are in the chat box.
Okay, Aya, Aya, sorry to cut you. I can't hear you, but I've just seen now some questions via email. How you engage your boss without making them feel like your concern and is not an attack on them, because when the focus drifts from the concern and the focus becomes about you attacking them. Okay, so partly what you need to do is communication, you make it about you as opposed to making it about the other person, right? I'll give an example, and I'm going to use a personal example that applies to the home front, not the work front. So if your partner comes back late, right, and then you're trying to communicate with them with regards to your unhappiness with them coming back late, you could easily just go out on an all-out attack. Yeah, go back where you were, whatever, I don't trust you. You're probably busy with whoever. You could do that, but it's not going to be helpful. Now, imagine if you use this approach instead. I get worried because we live in a country that has high levels of violence, where people get hijacked, where people get kidnapped, and all sorts of crazy things happen. So when you don't communicate, especially if you're coming back late, I end up being worried. I struggle to sleep. I get anxious. So make it about you as opposed to making it about the other person, right? That's the first thing that you can do. Another thing that you can do is to actually have a conversation that includes a third party if you feel you don't have the words to use to try and get through to them. And then the second question is, how do you deal with raising concerns that affect your well-being without being labeled as someone who is always complaining or unappreciated? So for me, it's essentially about making sure that you raise specific points that impact you. So raise them at the right time in the right forum. So if you have a well-being team, you then go to the well-being team. These are the challenges I'm facing. If it's a discussion you're having with your leader or your manager, then you indicate these are the challenges I'm facing and they're impacting my well-being, and you indicate how they're impacting your well-being. So always when you're communicating, make it about you as opposed to making it about the other person. Because that way, when you center yourself, it makes it easy for the other person to understand things from your perspective as opposed to from theirs, right? And then how do you deal with sharing opinions on work in a team and constantly being shut down and being invalidated? So certainly it's important that there be open communication with regards to the individuals that you feel may be doing that. So it might be that you need us to come and do a conflict mediation of sorts. We're able to assist with that. Have you sit down with these? I feel like each time I raise a concern or each time I try and share my view, you shut down and you invalidate my feelings or my emotions. Why are things happening that they're happening? Okay, I think that was it.
Okay, thank you so much, Sean. I apologize that we ran over time, but I think this session was very engaging for everyone. So once again, thank you so much, Sean, for sharing your knowledge and insights on how our leaders, on the role that our leaders play in fostering a healthier environment for us. Colleagues will now commence with the lucky prize draw for a Take-A-Lot voucher. And the winner is Tapelo Melamo, the director of Melamo Projects. Congratulations, Tapelo. You win yourself a R1,000 Take-A-Lot voucher courtesy of PURCO SA. Colleagues, that brings us to the end of our webinar this morning. Thank you for a very engaging question and answer session. And those questions that Sean couldn't get to in the session, I will ask him via email, and we will share it in the email notification for everyone to watch the recording on our website. Colleagues, before we end the session, please note that the webinar was recorded and will be up on our PURCO SA website for those who are unable to join, or if you wish to revisit the presentation afterwards for some insight. Lastly, bookings for our 2025 PURCO SA conference and exhibition in Sandton, Johannesburg are now open, so please do visit our website www.purcon.co.za for more details, rates, and to make bookings for the 2025 conference. We hope to see you there, and we are very excited to host you soon. Thank you, colleagues. Until the next one, goodbye.